I'm kind of not even a fast follower. I'm more of a laggard when it comes to some of these new technologies. Like we're not going to be doing NFTs. We're not going to be doing my goal is to grow the business, and that means pulling really, really big levers whenever possible. So I've got a relentless focus on site speed, on conversion rate, on SKU breadth, and introducing new killer SKUs into the line. Talking relentlessly and listening really intently to our customers to make sure we're building things that they want to buy and that solve their actual problems.
All right, folks, episode 35, and boy, do we have a screamer. Don't let this one run away. You see, shoe puns, anybody? We have the president integrator, just the man with the plan over at Kuru Shoes, Sean McGinnis. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Robert. Great to be here.
Yeah, likewise. We actually randomly, again, the Bird app making crazy connections. You had thrown out a random tweet of people could just jump on your calendar. And I took you up on that. And I think we were supposed to talk for like 15 minutes and it ran almost into 45 minutes. And you're giving me this EOS stuff and all this stuff to think about me building a team. And you've been kind of in an executive leadership role for quite some time. And I was transitioning from kind of an IC role or individual contributor role into more of an executive managerial role. And man, that was one of the best meetings I've ever had. So first of all, that was free, which was crazy. I would have paid you for all the stuff you gave to me. But two, it was just this kind of like this super bro connection, or not bro connection. We don't have to be misogynistic, but this kind of this person-to-person connection where we just really real recognize real. And so after that, I knew I had to have you on the show. And then you also, from the good of your heart, sent one of our sales folks who has a little bit of banged up from his hockey career. Some Kuru shoes, and he can't take them off. I think he sleeps in them as well. I mean,
that's awesome.
they are the most comfy things. And the cool thing, and I'll stop plugging your shoe company, but they look fantastic. They don't look like the kind of quote unquote what you would think in terms of orthopedic or helpful shoes that are built to really alleviate a lot of ailments that you might have from your younger years, or if you are young, ailments that you just kind of have from just the nature of the beast. So anywho, I will stop rambling. I'm just a big super fan of yours, and I'm so happy I'd have you on the show.
Well, likewise, I'm glad to be here. That office hours tweet just filled my calendar for probably 5 weeks straight. It was awesome. I loved it. And you were early. You were all over that, man. So it was great to be able to get to know you and to use you as kind of a guinea pig. I think you might have been my first or second meeting there, but it's just been really valuable. My tendency is to kind of take this kind of gruff old man, get off my lawn persona, generally speaking. And it's like, I put that out there in a way to kind of force myself to just be more open and transparent and available to these kind of random connection conversations. It's been so good to do. I mean, you're probably getting a lot of the same value out of hosting so many interesting people on the podcast, frankly. It's the same purpose, but you get to repurpose the content and have business value from it. I get to do it in a one-on-one basis, right?
Oh, totally. Selfishly, that's exactly why I wanted to start a podcast where I can non-creepily ask like really, really smart people in the space to like just come on and jam with me. Like, absolutely. Yeah. It's cool. It's the number one networking hack. I love it. So you guys you're in Salt Lake, correct?
Yes, that's where our headquarters at. Yep.
Yeah, but you're a Midwest boy.
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago in the suburbs. Yeah, all my childhood was spent way out in the western suburbs of Chicago. I say Chicago, and then everyone that's from Chicago is like, "You're not from Chicago." It's like a prideful thing. It's like, no. I grew up in Elgin, a big suburb out in the kind of the last ditch of civilization between Chicago and Des Moines, basically.
Yep. So it's funny you say that because I actually have the same story. I went to Indiana University, and we'd have a lot of people come down from Chicago.
Sure.
And you ask somebody like, "Oh, where are you from?" And they'll tell you Chicago, and then you get talking to them, and like, "Well, you're actually from Schaumburg or something like that."
You're like, from Joliet or for wherever. Yeah. It's like, you're 2 hours away, dude. Come on, give me a break. Well, you got to orient it where if you don't know who you're talking to, it's like, it's Chicago-ish, right? So
100%. But that's exactly what they would say. Is like we'd spend 20 minutes explaining where this small town is, like this suburb of this extension of Chicago versus just saying Chicago. So I love it. How'd you get to Utah?
I was recruited out here about 6 or 7 years ago now. It's 2015. Gosh, time flies. I was running marketing inside of a e-commerce business within Sears. So we sold appliance repair parts to people that were brave enough to try and do the repairs themselves, kind of the DIY community. Did 9 figures online and 8 figures in profit, and ran the marketing
Oh,
function
wow.
for that business, and was contacted by a really strong recruiting firm that's oddly enough based in Chicago. They were recruiting for a new marketing lead for a lead gen business out here in Salt Lake City called ClearLink. So ClearLink is, if you think of them as like a super affiliate business, a lot of the big companies that are kind of home services oriented, telephone companies, TV, internet, satellite, home security, also some insurance stuff as well. But we used to build and host our own websites that looked and felt like the brand's website. And then we would drive you into our call center that we owned and operated. We'd sign you up for those services. While we had you on the line, we would cross-sell you other services that weren't sort of in violation of our rights and agreements with those big companies. So we represented AT&T and Verizon and Frontier Communications, all those big ones. So led a big digital team there. Along the way, we won the Mattress Firm account as kind of a more pure digital agency. So I built a team of 30 or so people that worked on the Mattress Firm account for a bit here in town. And that's how I landed in Salt Lake.
How cool. That's awesome. And then, so how did you transition into your current gig?
Yeah, when I was recruited at ClearLink, we were owned by some private equity folks, and the original plan was they were on the downward side of their investment cycle, and at least the thinking at the time was, hey, we're going to sell to another PE group. So 6 months after I joined the firm, they actually sold to a strategic buyer. So it was far less interesting based on what I had originally sort of agreed to. But boy, did I love the work, and I loved the team, and I loved everything about that job. So I stayed there and really stuck it out for about another 2 years or so. Very transparent conversations with the rest of senior leadership along the way. And ultimately we decided that we'd part ways, and I opened up kind of my thinking to whatever might be next. Interestingly enough, was introduced to our CEO here at Kuru at that time when I was leaving ClearLink. But I got an opportunity that looked too good to be true on paper, and went over to Knoxville for almost a year, kind of working on that, but then came back to Salt Lake, reopened up the conversation with our CEO, and here we are, almost 2.5, close to 3 years later. So I joined in October of 2019, and it's been an incredible move, great growth story, and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, give us a little bit of spiel about Kuru right now, kind of, because it is a really, when we talked about it, it was real. I hadn't known about it, or basically known from you, but yeah, give us a little bit of a background, kind of like what you guys do, what your guys' shtick.
Yeah, so the business was founded in 2008, so we've been around for a long time. Direct to consumer most of that time. It was originally launched in a more traditional retail format, and the initial order from Asia was on the water when Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, and all of the retailers pulled their orders, and so you got this young founder who's kind of staring at, a mountain of inventory. A mountain relative to today is really next to nothing, right? But he had that book of inventory represented every dollar he'd ever saved or raised. He's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't know what. So it was almost a liquidation strategy originally. He wrote the original website in Drupal, did it all himself. Classic, he had raised a little bit of money, not a ton, and started selling, started buying AdWords on Yahoo way back in the day. I mean, this is super early, right? Here we are 13 years later. It was the initial plan was like, okay, I'm just going to get rid of this and we'll unwind the business. We'll try and figure out what we're going to do next. The business kind of got catapulted on the back of a business plan win in 2006 that he actually won the grand prize at the University of Utah. So that $40,000 was kind of seed money that sent him off, and he did a bunch of research on how to make shoes, how the body works, how the biomechanics of the foot and the gait. Did a lot of patent research, honestly, was reading up on all these patents that a bunch of other folks that had come before had done. And his original kind of thesis was, what happens if I engineer directly into a shoe kind of the shapes and materials you typically buy in an aftermarket insert, right? Like, why, if I'm buying a brand new pair of running shoes, do I have to go spend another $80 to make them work for me, right? And so he just thought, well, that's got to be better. He didn't set out to solve for foot pain problem. Genuinely, it was just like, this is the way the body works, and I think if I build this thing in there, that it'll be a better shoe. And it comes to find out when he started talking to lots and lots of customers, as you do in those early days, right? Yeah. They kept saying, oh my gosh, this thing has taken away my foot pain that I've been dealing with forever, kind of like your coworker, right? I mean, my foot was hurting in this way or that way or the other way. I put these things on, and within a week or two, it's still to this day, we get that feedback almost every single day. If you go to the site and you read the consumer reviews on any one of the pairs of shoes, you'll get incredible feedback around this thing really changed my life. So here we are 13, 14 years later, growing really rapidly, direct to consumer only. Just, thrilled to kind of continue that growth story and figure out what's next for the brand. And so there we are.
Yeah, I love that. But you forgot one little aspect of it, or one little vector. They look awesome. So how did he get the design? Well, because there's been a lot of people out there that have kind of not solved for as well as you guys have, but you know what I mean? They've really taken a utilitarian bent of like, oh, you're just going to get what it looks like, because it's accomplishing the job of, again, alleviating pain, or et cetera, kind of what you guys are doing. But you guys are kind of in the best of both worlds, where there's no way that you're going to look at this shoe and think it's therapeutic. Like, they look awesome.
Yeah, it's I'm so glad that you say that.
Came in.
Yeah, I'm really glad you say that, because I'll get to the design angle in a second. I think we've evolved the design language of the shoes quite a bit over time, and there's still a big debate in-house around, should we make them more unique and look and feel like a Kuru, or should we just make them, look and feel awesome within that specific category? Because we do have shoes across a wide variety of different styles. I mean, we've got 2 or 3 or 4 major kind of sneaker types. We've got a handful of different types of sandals. And one of the big questions is like, should we kind of survey the landscape and see what the best selling, let's use a light duty hiker as an example. If we're going to go build a hiking shoe, should it look and feel like what's best in class? What's the best selling stuff now? Or should we make it something that the design language and the design red thread carries all the way through, so that it's a Kuru? I mean, I'll give the best example of that is something like Allbirds, right? A pair of Allbirds shoes the minute you look at them, because every single pair of them looks and feels like an Allbirds. It's got a brand identity that's really coherent and very consistently applied throughout the product line. And we're still evolving that. But back to the point that you made, if I were to define the category that we live in, I would say we are stylish shoes for foot pain. And the way I describe that is a Venn diagram, right? Like, typically stylish shoes are the things that cause foot pain, and typically foot pain oriented shoes don't look very stylish. And when you overlap that Venn diagram in that middle, that's where I think kind of Kuru lives, in that sliver of the best of both possible worlds. Now, you can certainly look at our line and go, there's some not very stylish stuff in there. Like, and I would agree with you, but I do think as kind of a North Star for what we're shooting for as a brand, to me, that's where it makes the most sense for us to kind of define that category that way. And so we're actually having a lot of debates internally between and among the marketing team of like, what's the best value proposition? How do we get everyone in the world to kind of know Kuru exists and what we stand for, right? And that's my simplistic non-brand mind goes right to stylish shoes for foot pain. Just label the category, inhabit it beautifully and consistently, and everything else will kind of come from that. But we're having that big debate around like, do we focus on the things that being free from foot pain allows you to do, more aspirational marketing, right? Looking at Maslow's hierarchy needs, like, how do we get to the point where we're communicating what wearing Kurus makes possible for those that were dealing with debilitating foot pain before they found us, right? How do you make it a human connection where there's emotion involved, and people can really identify and see themselves in that marketing piece, right? So we're going to test everything, and we've finally got the talent and the skill set and the everything to kind of make those tests a reality. So it's a question of sequencing and timing, but you'll be seeing some different things from us in the future for sure in the marketplace.
How exciting. And the other thing that's really interesting about shoes as well, because I love how you put that, almost the value generation is at the nexus of both of those, the aesthetic as well as the utility of the shoe. But I'm guessing too, you guys have some great retention numbers, because notoriously footwear has really strong retention, right? Like, that's why Nike, all these other people spend so much money in the youth, because it usually takes a really big Cambrian explosion or some sort of seismic shift to get somebody out of a shoe that they grew up with or a brand that they grew up with.
Yeah, it's funny. We just completed a Jobs to Be Done persona project where we talked to a couple hundred customers and really tried to dig in and understand like what is the various ways that people are using the shoes today. And there's definitely kind of two camps. There are people that view it as like a Band-Aid, right? Like I know I'm in foot pain right now, or I know I'm going to be do something that's going to lead to foot pain. If I'm going to go to Disney and walk around all day, or I'm going to travel and I'm going to be walking through an airport, I'm going to wear my Kurus because they help solve this problem for me, but it's not an everyday fix for them. And then there's this other group that like, you will pry these from my cold, dead hands, and I will wear them all the time because they took this foot pain away from me, and it's literally changed my life. And I want nothing but Kurus in my closet. And anything else that I have to do when I'm not wearing Kurus, I'm kind of pissed off at the brand for not building that type of a shoe. Like if I'm in a bowling league, I want a pair of bowling shoes with Kurus. Like we've had people ask for squash shoes, golf shoes, steel-toed boots, cowboy boots, you name it. And they say, why can't you just make one of everything with your technology in it? And the answer is like, well, you got to figure out what the market's going to bear and like what the next category for us to enter really should be. But that's the way that we think about most of those folks. Is there's definitely those two big camps, and we're trying to understand, is it even possible to move people from one to the other? But you're right. There's definitely I've sort of joked with our CEO a long time ago. I feel like he's stumbled into, in some ways, just footwear is such a beautiful thing. I mean, name me a more expensive product that you wear on your body anywhere every day that wears out as quickly as a pair of shoes. I mean, it's literally planned obsolescence, right? I mean, they don't last forever. We all know they don't last forever. You've got to replenish them eventually. And so, I don't know of anything that I buy more frequently than shoes.
Yeah, well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Just recently into the sneaker market, and I have been crazily buying collector pieces and all sorts of craziness.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. I didn't know the whole Genesis story. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let's do one more question for the main segment, and then we'll jump into the value add segment. What's the nicest thing someone's done for you?
The nicest thing that someone's done for me. Oh my gosh. I think of that answer to that question in a way that it's all about the network to me. I mean, there's countless examples and stories, but building those really core friendships in a professional setting, I think are just invaluable to me personally. And so I've kept a number of really, really strong friendships from all of the places that I've been. I feel like for the longest time, I've almost felt like a hired gun. I went from a 15-year career at Thomson Reuters to Sears to all these big and small companies across the kind of gamut, trying to figure out where I fit best as a chess piece, I guess.
Yep.
And the friendships and the network that I built, in part because you've got to put the time in and keep those connections alive and ask what you can do for other folks. And whenever people reciprocate that, or when they share that they've had success in their career, like that's the part that's most meaningful to me is the time and effort. I view that as my core responsibility. My job is to develop our people so they're ready to take the next step in their career. Hopefully that's with me. Hopefully there's a room, and our growth pathway means that there's an opportunity to promote folks. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's my objective. And I want to treat every single person on our team in that way. And staying in touch with folks and watching their career kind of flourish and bloom and grow to the next level, even when it's not on my team, it's just so rewarding. That's the thing that I love. Hearing that kind of news and staying connected with folks is what makes that possible.
I love that. And I think that's one of the more, when you have a really awesome boss, there is that really cool connection of like, if our priorities diverge, that's fine. Like, then you should move on or what have you. But at the same time, like, both people want everybody to do well, right? And when you had like the vindictive boss or stuff like that, it got weird. But it's just like, hey, if you have different priorities or whatever, that's fine. Then they're diverging. There's no problem there, and I want you to do well, and I'll help you on your next steps. And let's do that. And that's definitely the vibe that I got from you on the call. And speaking of that, let's jump into the value add. So we talked about kind of why you took the gig at Kuru, but tell me some of the kind of the best parts and hardest parts when you transition, because you transition from ultimately, you said kind of appliances kind of stuff into footwear, which is totally different headspace. So tell me some of the best parts and some of the hardest parts that you've kind of gone through there.
I'd say the best part has been building the team. I really am pretty passionate about hiring folks, and my network here in Salt Lake, because of that prior experience, is pretty deep and rich. And so for the longest time, I kind of had these devious plans. I walk into the business in 2019, and it was a little bit of a turnaround time. And when I joined the firm in 19, and we've seen really tremendous growth the last 2 years. So it's been really rewarding to be able to hire those top performers. I mean, I'll give you two really good examples. When I first posted our first copywriter role, I approached a senior copywriter that was still at my old place. And she had just been promoted to a managing editor. So she's just now getting the opportunity to lead people, and figured out if that was a fit for her. So she said no at that time. I hired an incredible copywriter who's a former journalist. She's awesome as well. And then a year and a half later, we hired that second person, and because the head of growth that I hired had the exact same thought I did, which was, oh, we need this person on the team. Like, she's perfect. Former ballerina, like understands foot pain in an incredibly detailed way. Both her parents have plantar fasciitis. Like, she's a perfect fit for us, and culturally an incredible fit. Same thing I had originally planned, and started kind of, wooing head of paid channels. And she, similar story, just wasn't quite ready to make the move. And again, 2 years later, he was able to bring her over as well. So here, I think I'm the one who's doing the recruiting, and it looks like my head of growth is just better at it than I am. But building that team has been amazing. I'd say the biggest challenge, it's both a challenge and it's very rewarding. I almost tweeted something today. Every Wednesday at 1:00, we have our inventory meeting, and we're talking about planning inventory and what purchase orders we're going to make and what SKUs we need. And that has been both rewarding, but also it's challenging. Man, I got to tell you, it is, getting inventory right is so hard. It's really, really, really difficult. Like, and I kind of give my CEO a bunch of hard time for this, but he's been saying, hey, we've got this big, hairy, audacious goal, and I want to have the fewest SKUs possible to hit that goal. And I'm like, we need something more concrete than that. That's not directionally something that's just going to confuse our product team and confuse our ops team. Like, we need something that's a little more grounded. But it's just hard to nail it right. Like, I wear a wide shoe, and so I'm a big advocate for carrying wides, because if you don't carry a wide, I'm not going to order from you. And so we've started launching some of our best-selling shoes in wides. We had a handful, a smattering of other top performers available in wides. Just getting it all right. Like, what's the right number of colorways in any given point? Like, I keep asking, like, what's the incremental value of a sixth colorway for this specific style? And until we really develop that point of view, it's been a little bit of a challenge. We've hired and really done a good job of building out. We got a new demand planner who's just been excellent in like upping our game. It's been fun to watch. And yet I want to get to the 1 yard line, like right now, right? We're probably at the 50 in terms of really understanding that. And you're going to make mistakes along the way, but it's been so intellectually challenging and difficult to wrap my brain around in ways that, there are big implications when you're running an e-commerce brand around what that looks like. You don't want to be out of inventory, and you certainly don't want to be over inventoried either. So there's a sweet spot you've got to operate within in order to continue to be successful as we've been the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a super math guy, and I love all these things. And you start to get into the combinatorials and all these things of like sizing, because ultimately you're in an apparel business, so you have sizing. But then on top of the sizing, you have variations, like you're talking about colorways, and like, oh my gosh, man, it breaks my brain. Like, and then being able, to your point as well, to modulate the cash flow with the sales cycle, right? So it's like, you don't want to have these warehouses full of inventory that you then have to like figure out, but you also don't want to be sitting on a ton of inventory where your cash is just getting ate up. And so you don't want to be out of stock, and so finding that really tight balance is just incredibly hard. And then again, you layer on the apparel side of it, where you're sizing and variations and colorways and like
style and where's the world going in 12 months, so we we're ordering and building the right new things. And it's definitely complicated. There's a lot. It's just it's super, super fascinating. And I got buddies who are like size 15 and they're pissed off. They're like, why aren't you carrying size 15s? It's like, it's
because there's some money in it.
Everything is an implication, right? If we go do that, it costs money. It's really a challenge, but it's so much fun, I tell you.
Yeah, it's funny. I love how you put that. It's so weird, like that weird paradox. Like the most challenging thing is usually the most fulfilling, and so it's kind of that unique coupling there. Let's dig a little bit into hiring. Do you have any fun hiring questions, or how do you assess a culture fit? Because I've recently gone on a big hiring spree, and that's one thing that I've realized. Like, it is so important to make sure that this person is not only a culture fit, but also in terms of the direct report. So whoever they're going to really report to, and like really jam with the most, that there
Yeah.
is some sort of chemistry there. It's almost like dating in a weird way, right? Where there
Yeah.
needs to be a certain aspect of like the personalities work, the relationships work, the expectation setting is in the same kind of realm. Can you give me some color there?
Yeah, I think the first thing to me to a successful hire is really clearly defining the role. I mean, honestly,
That's
it's
really
so important to do it right and to not forget things, but also not write a job description that's 8 pages long. Like that's some people in our business have that instinct of like, I'm going to granularly define every single specific task that you're going to. It's like, nah, like let's stick to the big themes and get let's get the 20% of the tasks that drive 80% of the outcomes. Right? It's a
Love
full
that.
on Pareto conversation from my perspective. So if once you've got that defined right, then I think when the interviewing, it's the is where you kind of bleed out that culture component of like, well, is this going to be a fit or not? And we just focus 100% of the effort there on our corporate values. We've got 5 of them.
Love that.
We put them right in the job description. We not only have them listed, but we give a couple sentence description of like, this is what that means to us. And then we say at the end of the job description, if you're not a fit for these corporate values or these human values, you're not going to be good here. You could be the most talented media buyer in the world, and if we're hiring a media buyer and you just operate differently, and you look at those things and you go, I don't want to work in a place like that. That's fine. Like it's not. It's just. There's no harm, no foul. It's important that we make sure that we're kind of qualifying those things on the beginning stages, right? You don't want to invest in someone 6 months later come to realize it's not a fit, right? And the other thing that we do, well, that's from a hiring perspective. My favorite question that I like to ask during an interview actually it came up recently, a LinkedIn post from one of my former direct reports. We've used this in the past, and she used it in a different context. But the question is, tell me about a time when you got feedback that you disagreed with. What was the feedback, and what did you do with it?
I love that.
And what that tells me is it tells me an awful lot about how you deal with feedback. And it also tells me an awful lot. I have this, it's probably, when I say it, there's going to be people who will be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you got this. What an outdated view. But I believe that A players are constantly starving for feedback. They will push you to give them feedback. They want to know what else they could be doing to make your life easier, to drive the business forward. And C players constantly avoid feedback, and in fact will deflect when you try and give it to them, because it's never their fault. It's always someone else's fault. It's always an excuse. It's always, well, there was this one time. And so I'm trying to ferret that out on the very front end of the process. I've had a few situations where you ask that question and you get an answer. You're like, nah, like I was pretty high on you until you gave me that answer, and this is just not going to work. So that one in particular is definitely my favorite. We have a pretty thorough and thoughtful process that we go through. We've got really detailed questions, sometimes too many, but we're trying to narrow those down on like really digging into the culture. It's a lot easier to both ferret out whether someone knows what they're doing on the skill side for the role than it is on culture. And it's infinitely easier to train for those skills, right? Than it is to get someone to change the way they think, because culture is all about like, what makes you tick, you know? And so that's what we spend almost, I bet between 40 and 60% of our time in the interview process focused on culture fit and values fit.
I love that. And that in my short experience, that has absolutely been the path for me. I have kind of like a proxy question. It's more so about failure, but personally, I've found that people that have failed more, I'm more attuned to them than people that haven't failed but are super successful or super talented. Just because I want people that I know that can handle failure, because quite frankly, if you're not failing, in my opinion, you're not taking enough risk. And so you want to be pushing that forward. And to your point, like, how do you deal with failure? Like, it's going to happen. Sometimes it's going to be really challenging. Sometimes it's not going to cut your way. Sometimes it's, I think a big thing that can get conflated sometimes is, was it a great process, but just a bad outcome? Or you can have a bad process with a good outcome. And so it's like, if there's a great process behind it and it just didn't cut your way, you had a 70% chance of winning and you ended up in the 30 percentile, is what it is, man. That's fine. Let's keep running that process and that'll be fine. But when you have this terrible process and now you're just getting lucky and you're falling ass backwards in success, and now you're conflating luck with talent and like, oh, I'm this big man on campus, and you're like, no, you're not. And like, and so I'm with you on that.
You're in the right place at the right time, right?
Yeah. And like, you're not really talented, and maybe you are talented, but there's going to be a ceiling to your talent, because to your point, like when I was in sports, it wasn't when the coach was yelling at you, it was when the coach wasn't yelling at you. Because then, you know, they gave up on you. Where like, this guy is not going to learn. He's not going to be great. And I'm going to use my efforts elsewhere. And that's the kind of people, I think that's so well put. And there's a funny question that one of our VP of Biz Dev gave our HR manager, which is fantastic. But they were basically saying, if you were going on a flight with somebody and the flight got canceled or delayed, he calls it the airport question. Like, would you want to be stuck at the airport with this person or not? And I thought that was a really funny way to frame it, where I was like, oh, that cuts to the core of it. But I love that. And I think that's really so essential to your point of being able to understand. It's almost in a weird way like the malleability of that person. Like, are they able to come in and be synergize with the team? Sorry to use gross MBA terms kind of stuff, but like, are they going to be able to come in and be cohesive and be able to paddle in the same direction, or are they going to be their own kind of? And quite frankly, those people that are talented that can't play, it's fine, but you need to keep them off prem and use them as contractors. Like, you can still get utility out of them, but like, you don't want to bring them into a team that's going to be cancerous, and it's just going to start like I'm sure you've went to your fair share of parties. It just takes that one weirdo to come to the party, and then the whole vibe changes. You know what I mean? And you don't want to hire that person. You just don't.
It's funny you mentioned failure. Like, one of my favorite processes is the after action review, right? Like, let's sit down and actually talk about, let's debrief and just be super transparent and no agenda. I'm not here to throw anyone under the bus. Let's identify everything that went well and everything that didn't go well. And then let's talk about how we can learn from both. Like, it doesn't have to be, it's not all kind of a grind of just focusing on how do we always improve. Let's also make sure that we're baking those things that went well into our process on a go forward basis, and keeping that as part of our standard operating procedure, right? Those are so valuable. And in my experience, too many people just don't take the time to do it. It's probably a half a day's worth of work. It's an hour long or 2 hour long meeting with the team, really just kind of brain dumping and puking all over the paper. Like, this is everything that, this led to this, and this specific situation led to this delay. And okay, let's capture all that stuff. And then I'm going to take the time to write up my thoughts around how this can go. And then I'm going to give it all over to everybody in draft mode and have you guys, give tons and tons of feedback. We'll publish this thing when it's done, and we'll share it out with the rest of the team. And like, there's a learning moment there, right?
I love that. And kind of just to tidy that up a little bit too, I think one of the great things about that, where you can even more so get more out of those postmortems, is you can give people the chance to write about it beforehand. Mm-hmm. Because what I've found sometimes, like, you kind of have a big gregarious personality. I'm kind of a big loud guy in the room, and you can get these real kind of A-types pounding the table, where there's these introverts that have a lot to give, but they want to be perfect when they answer. And so they need to be in a room with nobody saying anything to them and being able to type it up to them. And so giving people different ways to insert that feedback, whether it be written on their own time or in play, like while they're doing that, I think can be really helpful as well. Because
so crucial.
There's a lot of introverts that have a lot of great things to say, but the modern work environment, quote unquote, isn't great for an introvert to give feedback. They want to be in a room. They want to be able to write about it. They want to think about it, do a couple drafts, and then submit it. So I absolutely love that, man. That's the path. So one of the things we talked about, I want to get into, is the EOS. That was something that I had never been exposed to until I talked to you. And we actually so we have leadership meetings, and we run our leadership meetings. EOS doesn't really pertain to us so much because we're just kind of growing too fast. Yeah. But the L10 is also something that's how we run our meetings now. But can
Yeah.
you give people kind of the high level of what the EOS is and kind of L10 meetings, and just kind of give people some clarity there, or not clarity, but just, the cliff notes, if you will?
Yeah, EOS has been transformative for our business. It's EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a system that's based on a book called Traction. There's a guy, Gino Wickman, who I believe the story is that he came in and started running a business that his dad had sort of started. It might have been on the real estate game. I might have some of these facts wrong, but he started to really document or the processes and the things that he felt was important to be able to run a business. And it's very typical I'm seeing more and more and more smaller businesses, especially in e-com. It's become kind of almost a thing that is, I just got back from e-commerce fuel live a couple of weeks ago, and there were dozens and dozens of firms there that probably run on EOS. So you can self-implement that business, or there are paid implementers. We use a paid implementer that we stumbled into. Our CEO was introduced to him through one of his CEO networking things, and it's been the best thing probably that we've ever done. We started using, you mentioned the level 10. The level 10 meeting is the way that they recommend that you run a leadership meeting, or any team meeting for that matter. We're using level 10s across the entire business at this point, but we started as a leadership group and really sort of drank the Kool-Aid and ate the dog food first on our side. In fact, we were using level 10 as a kind of an entry point into EOS, and then started reading the Traction book, and then we started training our managers. There's a kind of a companion book called How to Be a Great Manager. We started actually training to that, and using that, we would go through a couple of chapters, and everyone that was managing people in the business, we would get together and talk about it for a little bit. And ultimately, about a year ago, 5 quarters or so ago, we hired the implementer. So EOS, there's 6 kind of major components of the entire system. Get everything from what's your mission and vision and your values. We went through a whole process to kind of reconfirm we had our values originally, but honestly, we started from scratch and still landed on the same 5 core values. It gives you different tools. We talked about values in the hiring aspect. It also encourages you to use those values as you're evaluating and rewarding and promoting and compensating employees as well. They call it the people analyzer. So there's a piece that's part of that. But the level 10 meeting is effectively a 90-minute meeting, and there's a very structured way that you go through the level 10. The reason they call it a level 10 is at the end of the meeting, you actually run around the horn and you score the meeting. And you say, was this a good use of our time? Yes or no, on a scale of 1 to 10. And the goal is to get all 10s. And if you don't get all 10s, you get some 7s or 8s, then the question is, hey, what could we do differently to make sure that we get a 10 the next time, right? And so the fascinating part to me about level 10 meetings, and every time I see people talking about how bad meetings are, I'm like, you guys clearly aren't using level 10s. Yep. Because they're incredibly valuable to us. And I know that the way that most meetings are run, there's probably this aligned perception like meetings aren't super valuable. But a level 10 meeting, you spend the vast bulk of the meeting actually processing issues, identifying, they call it IDS, identify, discuss, and debate, and then solve that issue. And it's painful sometimes. You've got to have a lot of bravery in the room. People need to be able to stand up and go, I think this is the most important issue that is holding us back from performing as a team, as a leadership group, as a business. Let's really identify that issue. Go to the root cause of the issue. What is causing this problem? And then let's debate it like openly. And then let's come out the other side having solved it and making a decision. And then those decisions usually lead to a bunch of to-dos. Those to-dos get tracked in the same system. There are software applications that people have built around this, level 10 and EOS. We don't use any of those. We just use a Google Sheet. Yep. Like, it's very simple.
We use a Notion doc, same.
Yeah, we're reviewing our rocks every week. It's the meeting starts at the same time. There's a bunch of rules, right? The meeting starts at the same time. You start it on time. You end it on time. You spend the first 5 minutes asking for some good news, personal and business good news. It's a very structured meeting, but at the end of that 90 minutes, you're using at least an hour to have IDS these issues. Like, we're going to identify them, we're going to debate them like crazy, and we're going to come out arm in arm, knowing that the leadership team made this decision. And the whole EOS system and structure Every time we get together with our paid implementer and we leave, the word that has continually been used across every single person at the leadership table is alignment. We feel completely and totally aligned. There is no more, well, this team's off doing this and this team's off doing that. Like complete alignment on what everyone is working on and how that's going to drive us to greater success in the future. It can be a longer term thing that like, this is a big thing, but it's just so valuable. And it gives us a common language. And honestly, before I'd gotten there were a number of other systems that had been tried. And this is the one that's absolutely added the most value and had stuck. And it's, we use the system. We're going to do our all hands offsite talking about Q1 results with the whole business next Friday. And we'll spend the bulk of it basically reviewing the vision, the traction, and the organizer about it. This is how the business is going. We'll talk about EOS for 80% of that time, probably.
Yeah. What man, so well put. Go Google it or read the book or watch YouTube videos. There's so much on it, but you sent me down a rabbit hole. And quite frankly, I mean, I can't do meetings that aren't L10s anymore. Like it just feels so archaic and such a waste of time. And
I'm so glad you guys are getting value.
Shift.
That's awesome to hear, man.
Yeah, it's absolutely transformative shift. Well, and it's really helpful too, because a lot of times like the CEO is this visionary person. Like our CEO, AJ, is like, I love him to death, but he's crazy and he wants to build the universe. And so putting some semblance of guardrails on that is so helpful, because if not, he's going to just talk for the whole hour about how we're going to take over the world, which is fine. Yep. But at the same time, like, you know, you have the whole C-suite together. We need to make sure that we're getting value from, you know, it's not. Yep. And so the term alignment is so perfectly put there, where I leave those meetings and everything is so aligned. And one thing too that we did that isn't L10, but it is something out of a book I read called Blitzscaling, which is really helpful. So we're remote, or some of us are remote and some of us are on-prem. So we have 3 people on-prem in Columbus. I'm remote. There's a few people in Jerusalem that are remote. Even if you're on-prem, try and get in different rooms, because what can happen is if you're in the same room as the other people, there's like a front seat, back seat conversation. Whereas if everybody is remote, even though they're not quote unquote remote, like they're on-prem, it's really helped out the conversation as well. Because we had kind of some like AJ, Max, and Brad, who are all in the Columbus office, would sit on one camera. And there was just a different conversation there. So that would be something that I would add to, if you guys are remote or doing remote meetings, definitely use the L10 and everything. But also, if you are remote, try and make sure everybody, if even one person's remote, try and split up the group so everybody's kind of quote unquote on level footing. Because again, you get some weird front seat, back seat stuff where people are kind of feel a little bit out of the conversation.
I love it.
That was a sensational overview, Sean. Thank you so much. Okay, one last question, and we'll get into the rapid fire. How do you see the next 2 to 3 years of e-commerce unfolding?
Well, for us in particular, I know we talked about this briefly before. So we're in the process of replatforming from our Magento instance into Shopify. So that's about a 5-month project. Yep. I'm super excited to get there. I think e-com in general is going to, as you know, we've seen a 2-year blip where the mix of e-commerce as a percentage of total retail spiked as a result of COVID, right? So 2020 and 2021 were off the charts, not off the charts, but dramatically increased and accelerated the quote unquote adoption of being willing to buy online. We had this nice steady growth curve as a percent of total retail. And now, as of Q1 this year, we're back on that line, right? So like we're effectively, we had a 2-year hiatus where people couldn't go to the stores, weren't uncomfortable going to stores. And as a result, they shifted a greater percentage of their total spend into the online environment. Some of that related to buy online, pick up in store, curbside delivery, the kind of omni-channel approach, depending on your capabilities. And we're back on kind of the trend line. And it's interesting how those things get measured. I really cannot recommend enough some of the podcasts that are out there. Jason, Retail Geek Goldberg, talks about some of the numbers from the Commerce Department about every quarter, and it always reinforces like, this is messy data. It's not super clean. There's different ways that it gets measured, and there's different ways that some people put this activity in e-commerce and other people put it in somewhere else. So it's a little bit inconsistent in how we talk about e-com. But I do think e-commerce in general, there's some interesting things. I'm kind of not even a fast follower. I'm more of a laggard when it comes to some of these new technologies. Like, we're not going to be doing NFTs. We're not going to be doing my goal is to grow the business, and that means pulling really, really big levers whenever possible. So I've got a relentless focus on site speed, on conversion rate, on SKU breadth, and like, introducing new killer SKUs into the line. Talking relentlessly and listening really intently to our customers to make sure we're building things that they want to buy and that solve their actual problems. Those are the big things. We're just going to continue to focus on getting better at that. The other big question that we will eventually be faced with is, what are the points of distribution that matter for us and make sense for us? We're not on Amazon today. We have no intent to go to Amazon in the future. We're not in wholesale today. We have no intent to go wholesale brick and mortar, but there is a good chance that we will be in owned and operated brick and mortar retail, we will own and operate sometime in the next 2 years, probably. So one of my rocks this quarter is to talk with everyone I can about that in terms of like the cost structure and what you can expect and what's the halo effect in the e-com in that DMA when you go launch a store, like understanding all the implications of going down that rabbit hole. And what that might mean for us. Being a bootstrapped company, that's an expensive proposition, right? Unlike an Allbirds, we don't have a couple $100 million we've raised to go and build 30 stores globally with, within 3 or 4 years. I'm not minimizing the level of effort that took, because I'm sure it was a Herculean task for them. Tons and tons of respect for them as a brand. But they, VC back to go and make that a thing. And we're not. We've chosen a different pathway. So we're going to have to be very thoughtful and deliberate about what that looks and feels like. I know in my head what I wanted to do there for a while, but I realized recently that I had not gotten fully aligned with the rest of the senior leadership team. So this quarter, I'm going to get that alignment taken care of, come out the other side. Again, back to EOS, right? We're going to be fully aligned on what this looks like, where that fits in our 3-year plan and objective. When it comes time for budgeting, when we need to start setting money aside, how much that needs to be, what we really want that store to look like if we decide to go down that pathway. So that's when I think about what the future of Kuru looks like. That's where my head goes, is where can we start spending money outside of the traditional channels that have worked for us so that we can change the dynamics of the entire ecosystem for us? Yep. Is that podcast sponsorships? Is it radio? Is it TV? We're gonna test our first catalog later this year. So we're going to try to do some direct mail work. I've talked to a lot of folks in e-com, and that direct mail is definitely working for them right now. Yeah. So super interested in trying that and testing that out, seeing if it works as well for us as it's worked for some of the other folks that I've talked to. But yeah, I want to find ways. I've kind of joked with our CEO that my personal goal is like 5 years from now, I want every single American that when they experience foot pain, I want them to think of Dr. Scholl's and Kuru footwear.
I love
That's going to take an awful lot of money and an awful lot of messaging in all the right places to make that a reality. Think of Dr. Scholl's, they're in every single Walgreens and CVS and Walmart in the country and more. It's an incredible brand, right? What they've built. But that's a different distribution strategy than the one that we're kind of barreling down. So we've got to find ways to make that happen. Up until now, we've often said, hey, we want to find people that are experiencing foot pain and kind of slide up alongside them as a brand right at the point when they have the greatest need, and then kind of walk away for a little bit and know when to come back because they may have a different need and what have you. It's easy for us to identify that when you're self-identifying by typing magic words in the Google search box, right? It's like, oh, it's easy to find you. If I've got a hockey injury and my foot's mangled and I need something that's comfortable, I'm going to run a search and Kuru can go, hey, have you heard of us? Like, that's we're really good at demand capture, and we need to figure out how to get better at demand gen. Like, that's the kind of the upper funnel, bottom funnel. We're really, really, really good at that bottom part. We need to find a way to change the dynamic by getting better at the top.
I love that. And the one thing too, I think in terms of the Dr. Scholl stuff, they do have a magnificent brand. But where you guys almost have a leg up or a foot up is the Dr. Scholl's is additive. Like, you can't consume that without a shoe, whereas you guys are foundational, where you can consume your whole product without anything, where like you can just go buy some Dr. Scholl's inserts and they're useless unless you have shoes to use with them, where you guys are the total package. So I think that, and then the lookbook stuff's interesting. I never think they work, and I end up, they work on me. I don't know what it is. Like, that's why these people send out catalogs, right? I mean, you're OG,
they wouldn't do it if it didn't work.
That was the OG marketing
built,
where Sears built a whole behemoth of a brand off of literally a catalog. People don't know that, but
It's thick as a telephone book, and no one that's listening knows what a telephone book is either. But I'm old enough to remember.
We're dating ourselves. But, hey, you know, they'll never know the satisfaction of hanging up with somebody on the flip phone. You know what I mean? There's just not the same touching the screen where you just had that nice
press the
slap
button.
together.
It's not that violence, right? You don't get the
exactly the violent hang up. Speaking of violence, let's jump into the rapid fire. Are you ready to jump on the hot seat?
Yeah,
okay,
let's do it, man.
All right. Overrated, underrated. Terry Bradshaw.
Underrated.
What?
Absolutely underrated.
Interesting. Okay.
It was no one ever in the history of football threw a prettier deep ball than Terry Bradshaw.
All right. A bit of a homer pick, but that's what it was about. Finding the right pair of shoes. Overrated, underrated.
Underrated. It's so important to find the right pair, and whether that's just a style thing or a fit thing or a comfort thing. You use the word foundation. I couldn't agree more. It's everything in the body's interconnected, and even finding the right pair of shoes can just elevate your game from just a level of confidence. It all begins with your feet.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Law school, overrated, underrated.
Super overrated. I've tried to coach so many people out of going to law school. We didn't talk about this, but I am a lawyer. I passed the bar in Pennsylvania back in 1994. It taught me how to think for sure, but it's not the best pathway if you wind up going into business. It's helpful, but it's very expensive, and there are better ways.
I love it. Zion National Park, overrated, underrated.
I think it's appropriately rated because it is absolutely one of the most incredible places in the world. And I think everyone sees and appreciates that for what it is.
It's a great answer. Yeah, I went there. I got to do the Narrows hike. It is one of the most magical places. I can't believe it wasn't a national park until like the 90s or something, late 80s or something like that. It's crazy.
So cool. That whole all of southern Utah is just, it's a whole nother landscape. It's beautiful.
100% with you. We did the whole kind of southern down there with Bryce and all of that, and it is sensational. One of my favorite parts of the country. Shopify, overrated or underrated?
I'll let you know in about 5 months. As of today, we think we made the right decision. I'm really, really hopeful that we did. We're very pleased with the work that's going on with our development agency. It's been, we're 3 weeks in. It's been good so far. I have incredibly high hopes, and it could be a train wreck, but I don't think it will be. So I think for us, it's going to be one of those decisions you look back on and say, why didn't we do this like 4 years ago?
Yep.
And for us, it was the rationale that I had, the conversations that I had along the way with our CEO was the big holdout, because he experienced a lot of PTSD to this day from when we migrated from Magento 1 to Magento 2.
Yep.
And so like the question that I asked him, I think that was the most thought provoking was, look, at some point in the past, Magento was absolutely the right decision for this business and a lot of other business. Somewhere between then and now, Shopify became the default answer. When did that happen and why did it happen? And that got him really thinking, well, it's a good question. When did it happen? There's no doubt that if we were to build a business today from scratch and Magento wasn't part of the picture and we knew we could do the level of revenue we're at today, we would choose Shopify. 100%.
I love it. NFTs, overrated or underrated?
Overrated.
Oh, I love it.
Even my 20-year-old kid thinks they're overrated. Like this is, I'm trying to figure out who believes that. I think the blockchain itself has some really interesting applications. I think the stuff we're using it for today is probably all overrated, but we'll see. I could be the old fogey just screaming, shaking my fist at the moon, get off of my lawn, you crazy kids.
No, I'm with you there too. I think that NFTs are the implications for art, I think, are terrible, but like concert tickets would be interesting where you can only mark up the concert ticket by 3x or something like that. Like having some things there, because I get really annoyed when people pervert the economics. Looking at you, Ticketmaster, where you start to, it's not the market. Anywho, that's a whole nother story. EOS, overrated or underrated?
I think it's underrated. I think it's catching on. I think it's incredibly invaluable. And I think anyone who's running a smaller business that has teammates involved, if you got 10 or more employees, I would absolutely encourage everyone to take a look at it, regardless of how fast you're growing. It's just, there's a ton of potential there.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot on there. To be fair, we liked it a lot. We just used OKRs instead now,
Yeah.
but it is very, very good. But the L10, I think, is applicable to everybody. It's absolutely the path. Favorite meal and why?
Favorite meal and why? My wife makes an incredible butter chicken in the not the crock pot, but the other thing that the pressure cooker. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And my 15-year-old asks for it probably every week. So
it's
only, we play with the heat probably every single time about how spicy to make it and trying to figure out that right perfect blend of spices. But it's unbelievable. She's an incredible cook, and the kids love it. It's the one thing everyone agrees on, and so I think that's playing on getting my 3 kids to agree when we're going out for dinner. Like, forget it. It's like a fool's errand. We're better off taking separate cars and eating at neighboring restaurants and then going somewhere after. Like if we're going to a movie or whatever. You cannot get them to agree. And I was probably that way when I was a kid too. It's all sibling warfare and like this is the way we treat each other. But gosh, there's never any qualms when the butter chicken starts smelling throughout the house. It's awesome.
Oh, I love it. Favorite podcast?
Oh my word. It's a toss up. There's 2 favorites and they both have the All In podcast is a big favorite of mine for sure. And the Fifth Column is another one. It's kind of the 3 guys that are semi-libertarian that comment on media coverage of politics and culture. Been listening to them for a long, long time. They've been at it forever, it seems. But those are the 2 that come to mind.
I'm a big fan of Conversations with Tyler, who's kind of
that
bent.
Well, I just listened to his interview with Barry Weiss where he was a guest actually this morning. So just so good.
He's an interesting guy for sure. Favorite place to travel to and why?
Probably Pittsburgh. I love going home. That's where I was born. All my extended family's there. It's definitely not as glamorous as some international destinations, but as a city, it's just, I think that's an underrated city, dramatically so.
I would agree.
And it's when you are going through the tunnel and especially if it's nighttime and the city's lit up, there's nothing like downtown Pittsburgh.
It is pretty cool. That was one thing that I was not. My dad used to live in Pittsburgh, and I was still living in Indiana at the time, so we would just drive. That is actually one of a little breathtaking moment. The speed though killed me. You have to go like 20 miles an hour or so for like 50 miles, like within you're just like, dude, I'm on a highway. Let me drive, bro. That's a little brutal. But when
the rumor that I'd heard was when they were recruiting players at Pitt and some other places, that they would always fly them in so that they arrived at night so they could bring them into the city through the Squirrel Hill Tunnel at night. Like that was like a deliberate, strategic, thoughtful choice.
Yeah. And if I remember my trivia correctly, I think it has more bridges per square mile than even Venice. Like it's tons of bridges everywhere. It's really cool. It's actually, underrated city for sure. Okay. Last question. You'll make it through the rapid fire. If you could have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive, fictional or non-fictional, who would they be? So you're at a 4-person table. You're sitting at the head. You get to invite 3 people. Who are you inviting?
Oh my gosh. 3 people. This is a tough one. I should have prepared better for this one. I'd say Steve Jobs has to be on the list.
Ooh, love that.
It'd be super interesting to pick his brain and chat with him, get to know him. Probably Milton Friedman.
Ooh, okay.
Old school economist. I think he's just a fascinating character.
Yep.
There's got to be a sports guy in there. I would say Jack Nicklaus. He's just unbelievable. Big. I love golf, and until Tiger came along, obviously he set the standard, and he's still really active and interesting. Very active on social media, on his Facebook platform. Seems like one of the most generous guys I've ever seen with that level of kind of excessive, success in his life. He's just such a gracious guy. It seems like.
Yeah, that's the shark guy, right? The Sharks.
That's Greg Norman.
Oh, Greg Norman. I'm conflating. They just did a cool 30 for 30 on Greg Norman. I don't know if you've seen it. called Sharp.
I have not seen that.
It just came out.
I saw a different 30 for 30 promoted this morning. I can't wait to go see about a Penn State situation back in the day.
I can't believe I
dying to go watch
totally conflated Jack Nicklaus. Oh my gosh.
That's all right.
Shame.
You're clearly not a golfer.
Shame. No, I tried it once, and I figured that you need money and time, and those were two things I didn't have, and I hate being bad at things, and so I was like, forget this, man. I'm out.
I can understand that. Yeah, it's a fun sport. It's the game I'll play forever. I mean, I played with my dad about a month ago. He's 81, 82, and you can just play the game forever, man. You won't be as good as you were when you were 30, but you can still get it done, you know?
And I'll tell you what, if I could go back and do it all over again and be a pro athlete, I would definitely be in golf. You go to the most beautiful places. You never play in inclement weather. It's very pretty. I caddied for a couple summers, and there ain't nothing wrong with country club life. It is beautiful, man. It is. You're on the most incredible, beautiful manicured courses. You're in nature. You're walking. It's could be worse. Sean, you made it. Rapid fire.
All right.
How amazing. Tell people how they can get involved with Kuru. How can they follow you on Twitter? This time is yours, my friend.
Yeah, so we're online at kurufootwear.com, Kuru. Here's the kurufootwear.com. If you know anyone who's got foot pain, send them our way. We'll take good care of them. Have a great returns policy. Try them before you buy them, that type of thing. 45 days to make sure that they're working for you. Our customer experience team is incredible. They take really good care of everybody, all of our customers. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Just search for the name Sean McGinnis. I'm around. I tend to dominate the search results. Those poor other guys named Sean McGinnis don't know what hit them, but there's a few of them. It's like I got a lacrosse coach, like that poor guy. Like, geez, But connect with me. Shoot me a DM. My DMs are open on Twitter. Used to be really active on Twitter. It's funny. A couple of you guys are really racing to try and keep the Twitter game going and grow the followership. Like I have 13,000 followers. I think 12,900 of them were earned about 10 years ago when I was super active on Twitter. So I don't know how that actually gets measured, or I don't really care much about it. But my DMs are open. Connect with me there. Shoot me a note on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. And you know what? It's probably time when this comes out, I'll re-promote my office hours. And if you want to schedule a 30-minute meeting on Zoom with me, every weekday I've got an hour open for a 30-minute meeting. So if you can grab one of those slots, there's always room for one per weekday. So I'll re-promote that soon. And if you want to connect with me, that's always a good place to do it there too.
Oh, I will be retweeting that like crazy. That was transformative meeting. You should charge people for this. Sean, you're the man. Thank you so much for all your knowledge, eloquent and thoughtful answers. And I can't believe you said Terry Bradshaw's underrated. I thought you did. He has like all these accolades.
He does, but no one thinks of him in the same, when you talk about the greatest quarterbacks, he's almost never even enters the conversation to be in the top 10.
That's a fair point. I'll give you that.
You got
people say Dan Marino more than him, and Dan
Marino, Elway. There was a whole class of folks that barely won one or never even won one, and they all rate those guys above Terry. So that's
a fair point. That's a fair point. All right, folks, if you do want to get more involved with Triple Whale, we are at trytriplewhale.com, or you can follow us on the Twitters. And then we have a fantastic newsletter that goes out every Tuesday, Thursday called Whale Mail. You can subscribe right on our Twitter profile at Triple Whale. Sean, you're the man. Thank you so much. If you're ever out in Austin, give me a shout. Really appreciate it. And we actually might make it out to Utah, not this year, but next. We actually have a big cluster of triple whalers in Utah, come to think of it. So,
heck yeah, man. Let's do it.
And we actually just hired our director of product marketing out of Utah. So he'll be working remotely there too. So, yeah, so all the Utah love. And if you get a chance, go to Zion National Park. It is absolutely, or just Southern Utah. It is an experience like none other. It is some of the, outside of California, I think it's probably the prettiest part, one of the prettiest parts in the nation. It is magnificent nature if you're into that kind of thing. Well, that's it, folks. That's 35 in the books. Thanks again, Sean. We'll see you soon. Hopefully, go Steelers. Yeah, you guys are kind of on the downswing, but you've won enough. Let some other people take some championships home for a little while. That's it, folks. That's all we got, and we'll see everyone on the flip.